So Zach Edey, tell me why the best player in college basketball is not even necessarily a guarantee to go in the first 19, 20 picks.
Oh boy.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, William Liu. Today I'm joined by Sam Vecenie to talk about the NBA draft on the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. Make sure you find Hello and Welcome wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe. Please review the program. Please keep commenting, liking, and subscribing to the channel on YouTube as well. We are growing, and we are growing at a great pace. Keep following us at Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube at Hello Welcome Pod. Okay, so we're on with Sam Vecenie, senior writer at The Athletic and the host of the Game Theory podcast. Sam, first off, I gotta admire your grind. Okay, like you're in Melbourne, you watched Game 2, you broke it down for roughly like 2.5 hours, like roughly about that. You know?
No, we talked about Game 2 for like 40 minutes, and then we talked about like off-season stuff after that. But no, I mean, look, we go 2 or 3 times a week. It's super great with Bryce Simon, and I'm, shout out to you guys. I saw A, congratulations on the new show, but B, I mean, I saw number 1 in Canada. Let's go.
It's just Canada. Come on. Like, I feel like if any other major basketball podcasters moved up here, I'd be like very threatened personally. But thank you. Thank you so much. Of course, for people who don't know, you operate out of Melbourne. And so this is morning time for you. And first thing, you are back up on a microphone, ready to talk about the NBA draft. And of course, you can't begin a conversation about the NBA draft without talking about the Toronto Raptors. I mean, come on now, 19-31. They're exciting. We see this kind of a flatter draft this year. A lot of prospects where, the Raptors probably could, like somebody at 19, pick somebody, and then another person that they had in the same range might still be there at 31. We'll get to the Raptors in just a second, but I guess my overall question, just to begin this, is who's going to go number 1, and why is there no consensus on like the top 5 of this draft? I don't remember another one like this.
Yeah, the last one like this was probably 2013, the Anthony Bennett draft with, Nerlens Noel, who was hurt at the time, and Victor Oladipo, and Cody Zeller was in that mix. Like, it was all wild and weird. It's kind of like this one. The reality is that this is just kind of cyclical, right? This year, it just ended up that there is not some overriding prospect that is this unbelievable player. Right. In the past, we've obviously had guys like Zion Williamson who were obvious number ones. Even Cade Cunningham, who has been like mixed throughout the course of his early career, was an obvious number 1 guy when he was in that draft. Even in drafts like that, even in drafts like 2018 or 2017 with Markelle Fultz, and then there was Jason Tatum and Lonzo Ball right there at 2 and 3. Markelle was still the guy that was the number 1 guy. It was not a situation where anybody was going to take anybody other than Markelle at number 1. Boston wanted Jason Tatum, and they traded out of number 1 because they thought they could still get him at number 3. So this draft is one that is not seen as having one that has that undeniable like star player. And look, the undeniable star players, they don't always work out. We just talked about Markelle Fultz, right? Mm-hmm. So the strength of a draft in my mind is often, I look at this differently from teams. I have to look at it differently from teams on some level, because I am grading like 100 prospects, right? And I'm trying to get a feel for where the league is as a whole. If you're on the team side, you really only have to get a feel for one prospect that you want to take, right? You have to have a higher evaluation on that one prospect than where the rest of the league is, and you have to believe in your process, and you have to believe that what you're going to do is right. The Raptors in recent years, like Scotty Barnes is a prime example of this. They believed in their process. They believed in what they were doing was right. They had a higher grade on Scotty Barnes than they did Jalen Suggs, which was not consensus at the time, and they've been proven right by that decision. So when I look at this, I think that there will certainly be all-stars in this draft. They will come from somewhere. Even 2013 had 3 all-stars come out of that draft. That is about half as many as what is in a normal draft. Typically, there's like 5.7 or so in a normal draft. I think that there will be all-stars. It's just difficult to tell where they will come from. And honestly, I think that development from this point forward will likely play an even bigger role in determining who those all-stars are at the end of the day, as opposed to talent identification being more important than the all-star side or than the development side.
Yeah, because obviously this is you live and breathe this whole process. For me, I'm more like the average like NBA observer in the sense that, all right, it's around draft time. It's the NBA finals are going on. There's like 3 days off in between. Let me go check out all the prospects and see what I like, what I don't like. And every time I start watching the top of the draft, I'm just like, man, I can't believe
don't love it, right?
Like 6'2" Reed Shepherd, number 3 pick. I'm like, okay, all right, we
just watched Peyton Pritchard get played off the court last night.
Sure, it's like how much basketball IQ can one man possess? At a certain point. He is still 6'2". There's somebody in this draft 6'2" that I also really like. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, the top of the draft just doesn't feel as like slam dunk as obviously in previous drafts. But at the same time, there are prospects, especially when you go down into, between 10 and 40, it feels like. I feel like a lot of teams can feel reasonably confident in liking a specific guy. And again, as you mentioned, what sort of developmental process goes into that. And so obviously for the Raptors, they hold 19. They hold number 31. We'll talk about 19, and I wanted to start there because for me, I wanted you to give me insight on 5 guys that I've already really kind of liked already at 19. The first guy I wanted to pitch is Jaylon Tyson. He's probably the top option for me at 19 if he's still available on the board. Big guard, 6'7", really knows how to work a pick and roll, really savvy. Again, I'm operating off of 3 YouTube videos, like 90% of people who cover the draft. That's why we got to talk to the other 10 like you. Gets to the rim a little bit, not particularly efficient there, but again, just has a real good poise about how he plays offensively. He feels already to me, already pretty savvy offensively. And I think especially for the Raptors, who very much have a need at backup point guard, need somebody to do some offensive creation as well, has some good size. I don't see why, first off, he would be available at 19, but also I don't see why he wouldn't fit the Raptors. So give me your take on
Sure.
Jaylon.
So let's talk about the positives first, which, you kind of brought up a bit of this. The thing that stands out to me is he has this really great mix that I look for oftentimes in undervalued prospects of not having like super high end traditional athletic metrics, right? But having like incredible deceleration, like using that slow step around the rim, right? To be able to create that little bit of separation. And then additionally complementing that with power, right? He's really strong. Like he has strong shoulders. He has the ability to bump and not get moved. I think that that's really important. Additionally, has kind of a funky jumper. I don't know exactly how it will translate immediately to the NBA. In fact, I would probably guess that it'll be a little bit of a work in progress, but made 40.2% of his threes at Texas Tech, then made 36% this past season. Hit 37% of his 54 catch and shoot 3-pointers this season, and then hit 43% of his catch and shoot threes at Texas Tech. He can make them off of like rudimentary movement. Like we're not talking about anything crazy here, right? Like just lifts up from the corner to the wing, stuff like that. But I think he has pretty real touch at the very least is what I would say. Made 79.6% of his free throws. I think there's some reason to enjoy that. Also, really aggressive on the glass. Really not afraid to kind of go in the trees and try and throw down. Like there's a lot of positive things there. Shows some passing acumen too, let's go with. A lot of rudimentary stuff, can throw some live dribble reads, but not, like a crazy passer. Here's the worry. They're twofold. First, like was catastrophic this year in terms of like over aggression. Averaged 3.1 turnovers. As a driver, often felt he was like over driving and would get in like this tough spot within 5 feet of the rim, right? Like that stuff's fixable, but for somebody who's not like overly vertical, I do wonder how exactly that will kind of work itself out. You need to be great in terms of touch in those circumstances. Guys like Luka, guys like, Kyrie, things like that. Just thinking of the finals off the top of my head, right? He can go up and dunk, but I think he tends to be better on these drives where he's like bumping and slow stepping, right? He's only dunking when he gets like the runway. passes are also a bit of a question mark. He makes some impressive ones, but then he'll also throw some like way out of bounds. He will also at times like read things late on the court and then just still try and fit it in anyway. Really felt like even on the good passes, he'd end up too deep in the paint and it would be like, well, where do I go here? Like, how do I manage this now? Right. The final thing I will say is I thought he was a lot better at Texas Tech defensively. So like there is that piece of it worth noting. I thought he was like horrendous this year on defense. Like I thought he was really, really bad in terms of, so like he's strong and solid when he gets his chest in front, but gets beat off the bounce more than you'd like to see, especially for someone who's a little bit bigger. Didn't navigate screens super well, got caught up in that group of bodies just like around the perimeter way too often. And then off the ball, just like wasn't locked in. Like you could see, like just wasn't ready to go. So I think he is an interesting, like people look at him and see his age, right? Like he's 21 years old, turns 22 in December, right? And they will see, oh, this is probably not like an upside swing. I actually think he's more of an upside swing than what would meet the eye. I think there are quite low end outcomes where he could like maybe not be an NBA player if the defense doesn't improve and if the shot doesn't translate. But if the on ball stuff really translates, I think he could be a like legit, not quite an all-star, but like starter level, like real high end player.
No, for sure. I mean, the offensive ability, it's stuff where it's like there's certain prospects where you watch and it's like they're kind of hitting the same shot like 50 different times across different college games, right? And it's like, okay, you know, like Johnny Furphy, for example, is like, I was like, all right, like I've seen a transition dunk, I've seen a catch and shoot wing three, like, you know, and I don't need to see the rest of this video almost. I think for him, you do see like a variation in what he does offensively, but I think my hope there is like he's a little overextended right now offensively. He's a little overburdened. And if you scale that back just in the right amount, and of course, if he makes improvements, like you said, defensively, I think it could work out. Okay, that was the first person I was, kind of hoping to potentially pitch. If the Raptors want to get a point guard specifically at 19, I also kind of like Tyler Kolek quite a bit. 6'3", white guard, Marquette. You got the sweater on right now. It's perfect. 4-year senior, tough as hell, knows how to work in pick and roll, lefty, 50, 40, 85 splits this year, 8 assists to 3 turnovers. Again, runs a really good pick and roll. The weakness is, I mean, he's smaller and, who knows if he can get his offense off at the next level, but I don't know. Maybe it's just I watched him in the right games. Like there's the one game against Villanova that I think he was super impressive in. What do you think about Tyler Kolek as a guy who could be a backup point guard for the Raptors, almost stepping into it hopefully within 1 or 2 years? Yeah,
I actually think he could probably play next year for the Raptors and be fine as a backup point guard. It is worth noting, as I say that like it has taken him a year to adjust. Like at Marquette the first year, he was not very good. He struggled with his efficiency and it took him like a minute. But he is so high IQ and so intelligent in terms of his footwork that I think he would be able to separate enough to be able to get into his spaces. The way to explain him is not like Marquette. It's almost like watching like a past Villanova guard or like a Villanova player. And I don't mean to compare it specifically to Jalen Brunson. I mean more like, 2-foot jump stop, using his footwork and his deceleration and his strength. He's really strong. You can't really bump him off the ball all that well. He and Oso Ighodaro were my favorite partnership to watch in college basketball the last 2 years. They had unbelievable synergy in ball screens, and it's why Oso will probably be like a top 40, 45 pick, something like that. Could hear his name in the first round, but probably won't. The way that they would manipulate defenders, like flipping screens, playing in dribble handoffs, like just a lot of different circumstances. You could run anything with those two guys and they'd be able to get separation and make it work. In terms of the shooting, Kolek is like lights out off the catch. Like that ball is probably not hitting the rim off the catch. He was 39.3% this season, hit 85.1% of his foul shots, made 44.9% of his catch and shoot threes, rarely seemed to hit the net, just point blank, right? Like he was awesome. He has great form on those shots. 59.9% at the rim, 47% on floaters. Those are both very strong indicators for smaller guards, and he does consistently get to the rim as well. Look, the defense is going to be a concern here. I think he's a little bit better defensively than what he tends to get credit for because he's stronger and more physical than what, the typical, smaller, like little white guard is, right? Like he's pretty strong. As long as he doesn't get beat off the bounce, if he can keep his chest in front, he's pretty okay at stopping, that penetration. The big kind of worry to me is doesn't have a great pull-up three-point shot. He attempted 37 threes out of ball screens this year and made just 10 of them, according to Synergy. Made 5 of his 15 threes out of handoffs, so that's 14 of 54 on pull-up threes in total this year, which is not awesome. The mechanics are good, and I think that he'll probably do it at some point. It's just not there yet. But if it doesn't quite work, I do worry that like the footwork and the contact balance and like the driving game might not quite be he might not be able to get guys off balance as well, and they'll just be able to load up and put bigger, stronger guys on him, and it'll be a problem.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's all completely fair. I think for me, for a backup point guard, he has a lot of attributes that you would hopefully want to see. And again, like if the pull-up three-point shooting does hit, I think that unlocks so many things. And he is a very strong shooter profile overall, so hopefully there's some development there. These are 2 older prospects, both Kolek and Tyson. Another one, Tristan da Silva. If you Raptors want to go, with another bigger forward, 6'10" forward from Colorado. To me, I don't know. The eye test, it kind of looked a little bit like Franz Wagner, maybe not as strong of like a downhill driver. Wagner really is very strong, and he uses that length well. Wagner's been weird offensively up and down because there's certain times where it's like he looks amazing, and certain times you're like, why does he have 7 points? But ultimately, Tristan, I think, is probably not as good offensively as a Franz Wagner, but a guy who you can immediately see contributing in an NBA court in the sense that he's got the right size for it. He's got the right skill set, catch and shoot three, has a bit of size. I don't know how strong of a defender he is necessarily, but let's just say he has the frame for it. Now, the Raptors, weirdly enough, have traded away a lot of their 6'9" forwards and now are short one of those. So I wouldn't mind Tristan da Silva if he made it to 19. What are you seeing there? Because I don't really see one skill that pops, but he does look like a solid B, maybe across the board type.
Yeah, that's exactly it. He is, and to me, those guys are a little bit more valuable than what people think now. Having guys that are like kind of solid at everything, not great at everything, because we kind of see this in the playoffs a little bit as well. Like Buddy Hield could barely get on the court for the 76ers, right? Because Buddy doesn't really have that like combo breaker right now. He used to like be able to drive a little bit more than what he can now, but like if you can just take away that 3-point shot, it's a little bit easier for teams to deal with than what you would think, right? Because you can like peel switch and rotate around, you can scramble, like you can do whatever you want to do around it. With Da Silva, he's a good passer. He is a good shooter. He made, let's see here, 39.5% of his 300 three-point attempts over the last 2 years, 41.4% of his catch and shoot threes in 2023-24. 83.5% of his free throws this year, 79% for his career, made 47% of his floaters and hook shots this year, most of which came on the move, made 63.5% of his shots at the rim, including 62.5% in half-court settings. So all of those numbers, like I'm just reading off numbers, but those are all really positive numbers. They're all like well above average, if not like very, very strong numbers. You throw in the passing as well, like that's a real factor. You brought up Franz. I understand why there's like a natural tendency to compare him to Franz, both German, 6'9" forwards kind of thing. Franz is a little bit more flexible in terms of like ball screen like movement. Like he can take screens and like snake screens and like kind of move around. He just has like better hips than what Da Silva does. Da Silva doesn't quite have the vertical like pop that Franz does either. And I'm not saying Franz is some like monster athlete, but I think Da Silva is not like a crazy athlete. But again, like you're talking about a guy like, with Franz that I thought should have been all defense in the Big Ten, and Da Silva, I would say, should have been, just that level below all defense. He's kind of like knockoff Wagner is the way to put it. Like he's like a little bit worse at everything except for shooting. Really,
Right.
like he is I would say, more consistent shooter at this point than Franz is. I think he's also older than Franz, if my brain remembers that correctly. It's pretty close.
It is pretty close.
Not.
Yeah, he's a 4-year senior, so
yeah. So he is older than Franz. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I mean, Diet Franz doesn't sound horrible, I guess, for 19. I mean, like, it's a bench player. I totally agree with you in terms of, like, Franz, when he works a pick and roll and stuff like that, he doesn't have a lot of moves, but at the same time, he definitely has more than a guy like Tristan, who I think is, like, more upright. It feels more stiff. He's more, like, kind of, like, north-south, and it's not
Franz,
really, like...
plays with, like, real bend and can, like, kind of snake around and, like, move around a little bit in a straight line. Like, he's not, like, crossing dudes up. It's that he's able to kind of navigate like little seams and creases, I think, better than what Tristan does.
Fair enough. But I mean, again, I feel like the floor is pretty decently high. There's not, it's not a huge swing. I think a much bigger swing will be Kel'el Ware, 7 foot, 7'6" wingspan, 210. I mean, the strengths, he looks really good on a highlight reel. He does a lot of really good stuff. Very mobile for a 7-footer. Improved a lot from year 1 to year 2. Just has a variety of moves. I don't know if you necessarily believe in the outside shot, but also at the same time, he works solidly in the paint. Honestly, the guy I would give a comp to, or at least in terms of not even competence, because whatever, you can't say two players' careers and circumstances are going to be the same. A little Christian Wood-esque, you know what I mean? Like, you catch Christian Wood on the right night, and you're like, whoa, like, this looks really good. I can't believe he's bouncing for 5 to 6 teams. And then it's sort of like, okay, so why is he even available at 19? And that's where you hear some of the reports of, like, he might not play
because he's Christian Wood-esque.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about Diet Christian Wood now. Now we talked about Diet Franz Wagner.
So I like Ware more than I like Christian Wood, for what it's worth. I am not a Christian Wood guy and never really have been. Obviously enormous measurements, came in at 7 foot tall with like a 7'5", 7'6", whatever it was, wingspan. Enormous standing reach, right? Unbelievable finisher at the rim, made 73.1% of his shots at the rim. That's one of the best marks in college basketball last season. 6th best among the 311 players to take at least 150 shots at the basket. 2nd among draft prospects behind Zach Edey. 2 dunks per game. Also made over 60% of his layups. Really good in the dunker spot. Great catch radius because of that length. Was good as a post player. The swing skill is the shot at the end of the day. He took 40 attempts from 3 this season, so just about like 1 per game. Made 42.5% of them. Best in spot ups and transition. Was not great in pick and pop yet at this point. Didn't seem like he had the footwork down whenever he attempted a few of those. Oh boy, the defense. So he made all defense in the Big Ten. I disagree with that selection pretty strongly. When he was locked in, I thought he was that level of defender. He was extremely effective in drop when he was locked in, can move his feet really well, doesn't get like tied up with his feet or anything while he's backpedaling or anything. Indiana was 12 points per 100 possessions better defensively when he was on the court. Seriously, like his length is just a big impediment out there. He's just a big dude. I don't feel super comfortable when he has the ball on the perimeter right now. I don't think he's a good screener. I think his timing could improve on like rolls. I don't think he was like a particularly effective player out of ball screens this year. Had like funky footwork, didn't look super comfortable in dribble handoffs. As I said, not a great pick and pop player. And then also like can't really pass or like make plays, it feels like to me. Like he felt like a panicky player when he had the ball in his hands a little bit is kind of the way to put it. If they took away his first option, it was just getting reset. Like there was no, okay, I've got 2 guys on me. I need to find where the help is coming from and hit that, player. It was just like, oh shit, like I have to reset the offense now. Let's see here. Defensively, just engagement level was a lot of it. Like a lot of reps where his hands are down and drop and he's just like not cutting anything off. Right. Let's see here. Not really like second and third efforts, I felt like. Needs to consistently box out. Felt like he grabbed rebounds in college just because he out high pointed everyone. And then like the processing thing showed up on defense too, that you'll see like on the passing, right? The gears would be turning on like his like rim rotations, and he would be there just like a second late, and even he couldn't make up for it with his recovery time, with his length, right? So, oh man, where you fall on Kel'el Ware. I thought for the longest time this year I was not going to have a first round grade on Kel'el Ware. And then I submitted the draft guide and I ended up with him at like 25 or 26. If you want to have him, if you are a believer and you believe in your development system, for what it's worth on the Intel side, it was much more positive this year at Indiana than it was at Oregon. That like rep about him not working hard, Dana Altman like said that in public press conferences, right? Like this isn't like, secret information that NBA teams have and that I'm saying now. Like Dana Altman was like calling this guy out for like not being engaged enough and like working hard in practice. Maybe it was just like an adjustment to college. You know what I mean? This year it was much better. Through the pre-draft process, I get the impression that it was better. If you believe in your development, as a team and as an organization, I completely understand this, and I completely understand making a selection of Kel'el Ware like in the top 15 if you really want to buy it. What I will say for the Raptors as well is, I think that they need a spacing center. If you are going to build around Scotty Barnes, whatever we think the long-term outcome of Scotty Barnes' shooting is, I think it would very strongly behoove them to have a spacing center. I think Kyle Filipowski is probably a safer bet than Kel'el Ware. For sure. To shoot particularly. Mm-hmm. But if you wanted to take the super upside swing, I would understand it.
Yeah, that exactly how I feel about it. You'd have to have a really strong culture as well. And again, it's just development. The physical tools, like you could see it. You know what I mean? A really big who finishes well around the basket and has the ability to block shots when he's engaged. Like that's all really good. But that's like very much. It's a player when you watch the highlights, you really get really excited, but you might be more underwhelmed if you watch the full game. All right, last player. I was going to put Day'Ron Holmes on here, but I'm just going to skip that because I think this being a Canadian program, I mean, like, this is my official fifth pick, whatever. I mean, like, he reminds me a little bit of Amir Johnson, and I love Amir Johnson. The Zach Edey conversation. I really want to have just a quick Zach Edey conversation because this is a Canadian program, number one basketball podcast in Canada. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. So Zach Edey, tell me why the best player in college basketball is not even necessarily a guarantee to go in the first 19, 20 picks.
Oh boy. So I like Zach Edey, and I have him. Where do I have him? I filed draft guide rankings. He will be in the top like 17 or so, top 18, right? I really like Zach Edey. I think he is I've been saying this all year. I think he is the best screener in college basketball. He is outstanding at making contact and like flipping his hips and rescreening and like getting guys like Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer like any sort of space to operate. He is fantastic as a screener, and he was really good at rolling toward the rim and rolling into post-ups and rolling into potential buckets at the basket. I thought he was really good at it like as a sophomore even. He's a really, really good ball screen player, I think. Defensively, I thought he got so much better than what he got credit for being over the course of his career. And I completely understand the concerns about him, playing defense in the NBA, given how big he is and given how, awkward it looks.
He just doesn't seem to have foot speed. Like
he doesn't.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm actually more worried about him in transition defense, kind of getting up and down the court in a speedy manner, and thus like potentially not creating more 4-on-5 opportunities for his defense than I am in drop. I actually think he's quite a good drop defender right now. He takes up so much space. He is so enormous, Will. Like, it's hard to overemphasize how big this dude is. He is 7'4", without shoes on. I think 7'3", 7'5", with like a 7'10" and a half wingspan.
Yeah, we got a half white Yao Ming size. Like it's crazy how large he is. Yeah,
enormous. Like he's a huge human being. And I also think that people are like looking at him and going, oh, like, but is he going to be able to bully these dudes in the NBA like he did in college?
I mean,
I think so. I'm just going to be real with it. Like,
yeah.
I love Bam Adebayo, and this is like a specific matchup. Bam is like one of the best defenders in the NBA, but like Bam is not big enough to deal with him. Mm-hmm. Like Bam is like 6'10" with like a 7'3" wingspan. Zach Edey is just like stronger than he is as well. Zach Edey is really strong. And the other thing I will say, like I remember talking to Zach before his junior year, before like the National Player of the Year breakout. And like you could see he still had some like baby fat on his face and like was still like growing into his body a little bit. I saw him at the Final Four this year. He is in unbelievable shape. It is like he is skinny. Like if you go and you look at some photos of him when he was at like IMG Academy or early days at Purdue, like, and then look at a photo of him now, he has like a six pack. Like he is like he's in unbelievable shape for a dude who's like 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. What are the worries here? So look, transition defense is like a real thing to me, right? Like, there will be matchups that Edey like will struggle with. There is a chance, I think, that Zach Edey is not a guy you want out there in the playoffs, unfortunately, because of his movement skills. I think he can play in drop. I don't think he can play in any other defensive scheme. And as we're seeing in the playoffs, for instance, in the finals, where Boston is literally just pulling Derek Lively, who is a much better athlete than Zach Edey, away from the rim and saying, okay, we're just going to like make sure you're at the top of the key and you're not going to be anywhere near the rim. Do you know how many blocks Derek Lively has in the first two games of the NBA Finals, Will?
Probably 0.
He has literally 0 blocks. Yeah. After, I think, like finishing in the top 5 of blocks per game, like in the playoffs to start this thing. So there are going to be matchups where he just like is not going to be able to play. And that's going to be a problem whenever you get to the playoffs. In terms of like the offense, there are times where like his hands worry me a little bit. Not a lot, just a small amount, right? Like I will see him like fumble momentarily with his hands. Most of the time he catches it, but if you go like below the waist or you go, like really zip one to him, I think he will catch it. I don't know that it will be like 100% consistent all of the time. The final thing here is like he is a post big, and like NBA teams are probably not going to post him all that much unless he has a mismatch, right? Because that's just not the reality. The good news is I do think he has that ball screen game to be able to fall back on, and I think that will be effective. I also just believe in the dude, just point blank. I will just say that the way I say it. He is competitive as hell. Like this dude is, he gets furious from what I've been told when this team loses. Like he is somebody that is the kind of worker and has the kind of mentality, I think, that tends to overperform. And he has done that at every level to this point, right? He was at IMG, he was behind Mark Williams and was like playing on the second team. And then he's developed to the point where he's like an equal prospect with Mark Williams was when he was coming into the NBA and won 2 National Player of the Years. He was like a top 300 recruit or whatever and went on to be the most decorated college basketball player of the last 3 decades or whatever it is. I just believe in the human is kind of the easy way to put it. That's why I have him in the top, 16, 17. I frankly just believe in him like as a human being to figure it out and play in the NBA for a while.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone knows Zach. I didn't have to describe Zach's game because I think everyone's watched enough, especially here in Toronto, especially him being Canadian, especially him playing for the national team as well. And I've actually had a couple conversations with just Raptors people, front office people, just like, hey, what do you think about Zach? Just conversational and things like that.
Sure.
And they won't necessarily tell me specifically like, yes, we love him, or yes, we want to avoid him at all costs. The one question, and I've heard this from a few other people, is just what role does he play in the NBA? Because I do think that like it's hard to look at Zach's game and how he played at Purdue and then look in the NBA and see, is there anybody who plays like that? And if he is going to be an exception, then do you have to cater your whole game around that, which realistically no one's catering their whole game around somebody they picked 19th.
To me, it's almost like a Jonas Valanciunas thing. More than anything. Like, Jonas is good in ball screens. Jonas is good in dribble handoffs. Jonas is really good at posting bigs as like a bailout offensive option at the end of shot clocks. Andy's really good at posting mismatches. Like, to me, that's kind of the role. I think that Zach is really good in ball screens and like you'll be able to utilize him that way. And then defensively, it just has to be drop. And he is a more scheme limited player than unfortunately what you like to see at number 19 maybe, but if they took him, like I think he would be a good basketball player at the end of the day for them.
Fair enough. I mean, you're gonna have to do a lot of these interviews, and obviously everyone knows where to catch Sam. You are arguably the most busy man just in NBA media in general, but especially around draft time, you will find a ton of your work everywhere. But just in case people really need a tip, like where do you want people to go find all your coverage of the draft?
Yeah, go to The Athletic. The NBA draft guide that I do, every year will be out in a week or so. I think a week or so is probably the fairest way to put it. And then go to the Game Theory podcast. Like I said, we talk about these prospects all the time. We try and break it all down. And, we'll come on and we'll do this again. And, we'll talk about draft prospects either once they get taken or if you want to have me on before the draft, we can do it again.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Sam, appreciate you. And we're going to take a quick break here on the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway, and we're going to come back after these messages. Welcome back to the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. I'm your host, William Liu. Big thanks to Sam for joining us on the program. Just to wrap up, I wanted to do some takeaways, some final thoughts, Jerry Springer style. No, I'm kidding. Zach Edey, you are the father. But I think, look, the Raptors had 19 and he got 31. And when you hear the recent comments by Darko, when you listen back to Masai's press conference at the end of the year, the Raptors actually did outline what they wanted, not necessarily from the draft, but from their offseason. And obviously the draft's a big part of that. They want more support at backup point guard, right? We saw, obviously, last year the Raptors really struggled on that front at point guard in general until they got quickly. And then, you probably want a younger backup big. Now, of course, the Raptors have gotten extremely unlucky with backup bigs, both in terms of actual tragedies in Christian Koloko and also just stupid tragedies in Jonte Porter. But yeah, ultimately, if you can use the draft with 19 and 31 to come away with a backup guard, with a center, I think that helps a lot. Now, of course, I think defensively, the Raptors need a lot of help too, but no rookie's going to come in and just genuinely change our life defensively unless they're like Victor Wembanyama. And even the Spurs weren't really great defensively on the floor this year. So yeah, that's why, out of the 5 options that I had here, and just to recap, the ones we talked about with Sam, Jaylon Tyson, Tyler Kolek, Tristan da Silva, Kel'el Ware, and I had Daron Holmes as my 5th guy, but I shoehorned Zach Edey into that conversation, and it was great to talk about Zach. Let's just say Zach Edey for the sake of it. 2 centers, 2 point guards. I think all of them should be relatively available at 19. What I said at the start of the draft too or the conversation is just, it's a flatter draft. So there are other options you can go to. For me, and looking at the Raptors, there actually is a list of who the Raptors have confirmed to do workouts with. So guys on this list that we've talked about, Zach Edey has been confirmed to come in for a workout. In fact, he actually did interviews as well. That was the one day the Raptors actually opened it up to media. But Kel'el Ware has come in for a workout. Jaylon Tyson has come in for a workout. I just saw Tyler Kolek's Instagram page, and he just posted the OVO Athletic Center. So he's come in for a workout. So those are like reasonably realistic options too, because when you think back to the Raptors' other recent picks, Scotty Barnes obviously went to Tampa for the workout. Grady Dick last year came in for a workout for the Raptors, and that's who they took. So I think that is a good clue as to sort of who the Raptors are looking for. Aside from that, though, there's a lot of juniors and seniors on this list of who the Raptors have worked out, which, sometimes happens because the Raptors love to go for undrafted guys. They probably will take some of these players coming in, too. The younger guys, when you look on this list, and it's on Hoops Hype, you can just look up, NBA Draft Workout Tracker, and you can find who every team has worked out for. But you look on this list, the Raptors have a ton of seniors. The one exception being the sophomore Xavier Lee, who's also from Toronto. He goes to Princeton. He put his name in the draft, but withdrew, and he's going to play more time. I think that's a good decision. He's a little too skinny, but I like his game, very shifty, all that kind of stuff. Shout out to all Asian hoopers everywhere. A lot of seniors in this draft too. So maybe that's sort of how they will go, right? I think the 19th pick is probably going to be one of Edey, Ware, Tyson, Kolek, these guys that they actually worked out. Again, assuming they don't, just go off the board entirely, which is possible. But the history here is they work out certain players and they actually take those guys. But yeah, again, just for the general strategy, if you come out of this with a point guard and a center at 19 and 31, you're pretty good. Of course, if someone slides, and we didn't have more time, maybe next time we talk with Sam or other draft experts, we'll talk about the idea of what if somebody from the top starts to slide a lot, right? We saw Nikola Topic, he injured his ACL. He's probably going to slide in the draft. I think Raptor fans immediately clicked to like, oh, gee, hurt his ACL. Maybe we should draft him. You could not find two more different players than those two, but still, there's that possibility. Last year we saw Cam Whitmore was the big slide on draft day, and to be fair, like he's turned out to be a really, really good player, and I don't think he deserved to slide to 20. But those things will happen, and the Raptors may have to adjust. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm actually pretty happy with the fact that they have these two picks. Now, of course, I'm not happy that they don't have an 8th pick as well to, take somebody even higher up to guarantee one of their top guys. But again, you look at the top end of this draft. When people say this draft sucks, it's really just the top end guys are not blow you away at all. Like, they just aren't. Maybe when you look back at it, something really clicks and somebody really turns into a monster, but there isn't that high end guy. But in the middle of the draft, there's a lot of useful pieces. And again, just, if you're starting your draft scouting journey right now for the Raptors, kind of like I am, I'm probably like 2 weeks deep into this. Just look in some of these players and just see, how their skill sets would be. Imagine it with the Raptors. Again, I like what Sam suggested with Kyle Filipowski as well. Kind of that playmaking big. That's probably the one thing is out of the bigs that I chose, they weren't really playmaking bigs. They're not exactly like a Kelly Olynyk on the perimeter. But at the same time, there is talented players, and that's our hope is that the Raptors take 2 useful rotation players. So if I had to pick one, again, I told you Tyson's at the top of my list out of those 5, but I pretty much would be pretty happy with any of those 5 players named in this segment. But once again, big thanks to Sam. I don't need to introduce what Sam does. Everyone knows how good he is with the NBA draft, and I just want to say thank you to him for joining us on the program. So that does it for us today. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. Big thanks to Sam Vecenie of The Athletic, producer and co-host Alex Wong, who sidestepped this episode but did some great research and gave great perspective and ambition as always. Our editor and lead producer Jerome Chang, and everyone else helping behind the scenes. We'll talk to you later this week.